Now. So welcome to this session, Staying Safe. It's for information and a bit of guidance around how you can keep yourself safe in your working environment. So my feeling here is that we've all got responsibilities which are outside our own job description. Then what I mean by that is, as the role models, whether it's a school or a college you work in, you would be a go-to person in any situation. If you're the nearest one, whether you are a first aider or a safeguarding officer, it doesn't matter. You are the person that's nearby. Therefore, the pupil or student should be able to rely on you to be the utmost professional in an emergency. So we do have those additional responsibilities within our own jobs. So with those responsibilities comes a whole other layer of boundaries, because although you want to be, a kind and caring adult, you want to be a person who can be everything to the young people while they're in your care. But as my own children got older, for example, in the college I worked at, I knew quite a lot of the kids that came to the college because they were friends of my children. And in that situation, you say to yourself, I've got to be ultra careful then that I don't cross over my professional responsibilities. And that is the bit, I think, where at times we fall into the pitfall of being human beings. And although that's a wonderful thing, it can also put you in an unsafe position. What we need to be sure of then is that our students think that we are scrupulously fair, that you don't have favourites, that there's no question that you may feel differently about one than you would another, that everything we do is consistent with our job and that we don't make any judgments. And I've noticed over the years when I've got students that I don't like particularly because of their behaviour, I have to step out of myself and have this Oscar-winning performance because I know that they mustn't know that I feel that way, and to maintain my professionalism and to stay safe, I've got to be the same with them as I am with everyone else. And sometimes we get it wrong, don't we? And that's when it becomes unsafe. So when I was line managing a lot of LSAs, I noticed, especially the students who had more complex needs, they would look to the LSA or to the teacher to give them an extra bit of support. And there's nothing wrong with that. But vulnerable students, for example, might ask for help, for a lift home, for some money for lunch, for provide them with pencils or pens, or help them out in lots of different ways because for whatever reason they may not be able to support themselves that way. And that oversteps the professional mark. Now, as an adult, you feel sympathetic towards the young person, and maybe every being in your body, every part of you screams, I want to do this. This is why I'm doing this job. But unfortunately, the reality is that you have to step back from that need in you to take on that extra bit of care of that young person because it actually steps outside your professional role. It's really important that you avoid sharing personal information. Don't offer lifts home. Don't give lifts home. Social media, we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, is a bit of a no-no. And discussing others, so having conversations about other people in earshot or with your students. So we all can fall into those traps quite easily unless we're aware that they are there. So here's the message. Resist crossing personal boundaries. I know it's difficult, and for most of the time we manage to do that, but there will be times when we are, I don't know, the wind is taken from your sails, as they say. Be clear about your own role at all times and support students with their education. That's the bottom line. People have always said to me, well, I've got people that have personal care needs that we provide. Well, fine, but that's still your job. It's not, you don't go beyond that. You don't take on other caring responsibilities for your students. And here's what I mean, especially if you work with older learners. There's an awful lot of them that have complex needs, which as an adult, you may feel you'll be able to give some guidance and support with those. If you're a pastoral member of staff, like you're a personal tutor or you have other pastoral roles, then the desire to do that, or the ability to stay away from those more complex needs, might be quite difficult, to avoid. But I would always say that you must help students to identify who is the right person to help them. Over the years, I've given phone numbers, printed things off the internet. I've flagged up with the counsellor or with the safeguarding officers or with personal tutors, but never, even whatever role I had, have I ever taken that on, even though I might know a little bit about the complex needs that the student has. The reason I say that is because if then it comes back around and you've advised someone to do or say something, it's really only ever going to be your opinion unless you're an expert. So you need to signpost young people to an expert, somebody whose opinion can be followed through right to the end, because if young people don't realise the hazards in their life and the risks of getting the wrong kind of advice. So that's another bit. For me, I've seen it and I would always wish that it didn't happen. So that's why I'm mentioning it now. So really the rule here is to help your students to avoid mixing up the feelings of friendship with a good rapport. It's quite a fine line to tread with some who are very vulnerable, but it's important. And I'll tell you something else about that. If your students feel that you are a friend and you need to play the behaviour role in your professional capacity, it's ever so difficult to do that because you've crossed the line. They'll say to you, well, I'm having problems with X, Y, and Z. That's why I'm behaving this way. But that's not a reason for them to do so. You still have to follow whatever the behavioural approaches would be. So it puts you in a very difficult situation. Never promise to keep secrets. Well, that's a basic safeguarding rule. There's another word apart from secrets, which is confidences. Now, I think secrets when it comes to safeguarding is when someone tells you something that's really upsetting and a definite child protection or safeguarding issue, then you must flag it up, and you must never say, no, I won't tell anyone. You must say, I will have to pass this on to X, Y, and Z. That's also very difficult to do, but it's part of your duty as a member of staff to never promise to keep secrets. Now, confidences is when someone's told you something about someone else, shall we say, and it's not a safeguarding issue, but it might be a point of gossip. And we all fall foul of a bit of that sometimes in the staff room or at the smoking area or when we're chatting. And confidences is another thing which I don't see it as a safeguarding thing. I see it more as a professional adult thing. The next point here about inappropriate attachments is when you think that there are young people who are very attached to you, or they do hang around a lot, they do want to make an appointment to see you all the time, come to your office or your classroom when you're not teaching or you're not, when you haven't got anyone with you. Recognise that and try and make some distance between you. It's ever so easy to fall into that trap. Be a role model. Be the person who they can trust without overstepping that boundary. Keep to the boundaries. Cool. That's quite difficult, isn't it? And I'm sure we've all met lots of vulnerable young people. Let me move on obviously to these bad boys. Social media has become the most often overstepped situation that I come across when I visit lots of schools and colleges. One of the problems is, particularly with older young students, the older age groups, is that they don't see any problem with that. We know you, we like to collect followers or friends or whatever it is in whichever social media platform. So they don't actually see that there's a problem with that, but you must resist the temptation to be friends on any social media platform. Your students will get to know too much about you. They may end up setting up conversations which are not around the education support that you're providing, and it crosses those personal boundaries at every level. completely resist it. It's okay once they've left college, and if you carry on becoming acquainted with somebody in later life, of course that's not a problem, but it definitely compromises you when you are working in a school or a college and you're friends with some of your students. And the reason for that is because there are occasionally allegations and misunderstandings. And what I mean to say about that here is that if you have a friend that you've added as a friend or a contact or a connection, or you followed, or whatever the words are, and then you have to undo the connection for any reason, someone could be offended by that. Why did you do that? You know, and a young person who doesn't have sort of lots of emotional intelligence might not see it just for what it is. They may see it as something personal that you've done against them. And we do know that social media is a bit of a bed of inappropriateness at times, and there's things that you probably shouldn't know about things your students are doing in their private life, and vice versa. So if that crosses over and then you unfollow or unfriend or whatever, they may see that as a personal slight and take offence against you. I've seen it happen more than once, which is my cautionary tale here. So resist the temptation. Now, transactional analysis is a massive, massive subject, and I'm not even going to try and attempt to explain it all, but I've picked out a couple of things here where we could step back and say, well, we need to change some of our responses to people in our relationship with them in a professional way. So, for example, a parent, adult and child roles would tend to be slightly different. So if you look at this slide here, the parent role is where in life a parent is superior to their children. They are, when you call parenting skills, it means you're role modeling, you're showing young people how to behave, and therefore you're taking the upper hand. People will copy that behavior, and if it's not appropriate, if you have a student who tries to parent you, takes the upper hand, then that's not very good. In fact, in training only yesterday, one of the participants told me that they've got an 8-year-old boy in class that says things like, oh, you women, you're always going on, aren't you? He said that to her. Now, where did he hear that from? So what we know about parental behaviour is it isn't appropriate if it's coming from your student towards you, and it isn't appropriate if it's coming from you to your student. That is saved for a different relationship. An adult relationship is where you are present in the moment and you have a conversation which always ends with a win-win. There's no malice, there's no determination to undermine, dominate. It's just a conversation, and that's where we ought to be. A childlike behaviour is where you are more concerned about being liked than you are about taking control or being assertive and adult in a relationship. And it may be that you mimic behaviours or you feel upset and you take things personally. So a childlike behaviour is that. So I've given you a couple of little examples here where I know that we can move between these behaviours all the time. And when I'm talking about it in a classroom or an education establishment, you need to try and sort of reflect on what this says and relate it to some of your own exchanges. So a parent to child, this is the conversation is, can you pass the salt? Okay, can you pass the salt? So if an adult says it to another adult, the adult would pass the salt. If a child says, can you pass the salt? If a child says it, the parent role might be, you should have realised you wanted the salt before you sat down. Now, I have to tell you that around my dinner table, we have conversations like that, whether it's the adult or the parent, the child, and anything. We interact in a way that's sort of very argumentative. But can you see the difference between a parental, if you have a student that says they haven't brought their pen and you give them a long-winded explanation about why they should bring a pen, you've gone into parental mode. If they haven't brought a pen, you could say, has anyone got a pen that they could lend, or lend your own pen? It's about taking away that any sense that somebody is being put upon or you're not treating them fairly. So there's another example here with the nice weather. It's a straightforward conversation. There's no dominance. It's just about solution finding. So we need to be behaving like adults. I've got a couple of examples here, and I want you to answer the question, which roles are being played here? So this question, this point here is that you say to the student, what did you get up to last night? So what role are you playing there? If you ask that question, so in the question section of your screen, I want you to put that in if you could, and what your answer, what role is being played there? And I'll see if I can find your answers. Can you see that on there? You could put something in the chat, or you can put something in questions. Aha. So we've got friend. That's the role being played here. If you say to one of your students, what did you get up to last night? It is a friend, isn't it? Well done. So any advance on friend, anybody? No, definitely is not appropriate. I think you'll agree. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not even a question you should ask, but you'd be surprised how many times I hear it. I don't even know if there's another way to ask it, because I just don't think it's an appropriate question. Anyway, next one then. I'd say yes, over friendly. This is you to the student. I really don't like Claire. Apologies if anyone here is called Claire. I really don't like Claire. She's a right pain in the and getting on my nerves today. So what role is being played there? Let's get these questions up. Yes, exactly. I think it's, we got someone that said depends on the tone. So I don't know which question you meant there. Is it depends on the tone if it's asked, or you to student? Let's look at this number 2, you to student. Yes, exactly. It's not appropriate. Why would you say that to somebody? You're causing friction, divisions. It creates divisions between students. It certainly isn't an adult thing to say. And yes, you're right, Julie. It's gossip, Amanda. It's very much about you setting up a situation where your student might start gossiping to you about another student. So that's right, Helen. Absolutely. It is almost childlike and not an adult thing to be discussing anyway. Okay, let's go to the next one. Student to you. I hate that beep, 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 idiot, don't you? So what would your response be to that? What would your response be? Because that's the thing. It's the response to that. And if you've ever had that from a student, then, oh gosh, sometimes you've got to step out of yourself, because even if you do think that they are a idiot, you can't say it. But what would you say? What would you say to that? Yes, that's right. Well done, Julie. Yes, absolutely. You say that might be your opinion, but that, as far as I'm concerned, everything's great. Or you might say, well, that's your opinion, and you have those, but obviously it's not my opinion. I've got another response here. Of course I don't hate her. She's doing really well. You know, if you've never come across these scenarios, well, I take my hat off to you. But for me, it's something that's always going on. So remember when you could get tripped up along the way. That's my message. So here's when to manage scenarios. Jokey put-downs and general chat should be managed as adult to adult. The jokey put-downs in my book is what they call banter. Now, I don't know what you think about banter, but certainly from my perspective, banter can be very hurtful at times, but it has to be managed in a way where you wouldn't constantly keep saying, don't be horrible, stop saying that, you know, talk about it, explain the difference between this and this. It's not a safeguarding issue at this level. It's about you saying, we're going to talk about this particular situation. Rudeness and slight insults. Avoid your child-to-child approach. If someone insults you, and I have been called the mad bitch queen from hell, which was lovely. I knew it wasn't personal, and I didn't respond in that way. I would address it through a discussion and refer it to the personal tutor. But it's not a safeguarding issue. and the internet safety. So you must manage that. So your relationship with your students, what they say, how they say it, and internet. This is the big one, and this relates to the jokey put downs versus banter. Bullying and online bullying, we know that. We know, don't we, that it's on the increase, and it's the law that you can be prosecuted for bullying. It stems back to the Malicious Communications Act 1988. And in those days we didn't have internet, but it was an offence to send hate mail or telephone calls which were hateful, anything like that. And it was updated in 2001 to include electronic communication. So that included emails, social networking, and text messages. So if you see anything or hear of anyone being on the receiving end of that, then I would recommend that you make it clear to the young people that it's actually illegal. And people who are able to do screenshots and things like that, it could end up being a matter of law. So bear that in mind when you have any kind of opportunity to discuss that. So it is illegal. So bullying is illegal. Safeguarding issues. When to report it, you use your own safeguarding rules. It's really important to know what they are, and if you're not sure, then now's an opportunity for you to double check that you've got all the information you need. There are obviously large pieces of legislation around safeguarding, and your college will have its own process, and your school. There are some things that you're going to be in touch with students where your safeguarding officer won't be, and if there's anything there that you think is inappropriate or out of the ordinary or that has changed, then you must report it. Don't deal with it yourself. Go and report it during the proper channels and leave it to the professional safeguarding team to take it further. I would say that in a situation where you're not sure and there is an alarming outburst of behaviour or arguments or something like that, make sure that you stay calm and everyone else around you is safe. So if you have any instances that you're concerned about, get some help. If you're in a position where you need to listen, you can listen, then do so. Make sure everyone got a chance to talk and to feel safe and to know that you will be listening to them properly. But I always recommend in every circumstance that you write it all down. Don't try and remember and say, I need to be writing this down. I'm going to make some bullet points and I'll write it up later, but that must be written down, and then do a debrief afterwards. So that's if you have a crisis. But in terms of your own staying safe, let's not let it get to that point. Let it not be something that you've said or done which has caused misunderstanding, has caused you not to be safe, and that there should be an outcome. So last thing, if you want safeguarding training in-house, we can do that for you. If you've got any questions right now, please type them in and I'll attempt to get the questions back up again. While you're doing that, just to remind you of a few things we've got coming up. These are fixed dates training. February, I've got the wonderful Harriet Alexander, who's going to provide a whole day of mindfulness training. It's going to be in North London in February. So if you want to know more about that, get in touch. We've got the behaviour management. This is our regular course that we run, always very well attended. We had one yesterday. And we've got a trainer again in the summer, meeting the needs of ADHD. If you've got people who are, sort of would be keen to be able to provide that training in-house, then they can come to a trainer day, and then they can take it forward to your own place. Right, what have we got here? Okay, questions about the safeguarding training. Well, yes, we can come to you. We take about, I think, maximum of 30, and it's about 2.5 hours is the training. We could do it at level 2 or level 3. So level 3 would probably be a whole day. Oh, you're going back to the social media. Yes, it's a good question, Jane. Jane's saying, what about when I've got adult learners in my class doing adult course? I think the same thing applies. If you've got learners of any age, whether they're adults or teenagers or 8 years old, If it crosses the boundary right during that period, then I would recommend not, unless you have a closed group where some of your adult learners can meet to discuss their course. And even with college, for example, that's quite a nice idea. But on your personal accounts, tighten them up so much that nobody can just see what you're doing. Nobody can see through a friend what you're doing, and don't allow them to follow you or befriend you in those circumstances. But certainly have private groups with them, because that's quite a nice way to discuss coursework without it overstepping the mark. Does that make sense? I mean, if you're a safeguarding officer and you don't think that's a good idea, then say no. But I've seen that work quite well with some of my own students, actually. So any more questions? No, I can't see any. Lovely. Well, we'll call it a day for now. Thank you so much for coming today. I wish you well for the rest of the term leading up to the next holiday. And I'll look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Bye for now.